Good evening, hello, and welcome everybody to this online celebration of 50 years of EU consumer rights. Now, we're coming to you live here from Brussels, so whichever part of the world that you're watching from, a very warm welcome to you, and it's amazing that you're tuning in.
My name is Jochem Jordaan.
And my name is Hajar Koubi.
And we are part of the Dutch initiative De Kiesmannen. And tonight we will be your host, presenting and celebrating 50 years of EU consumer legislation. We're going to look into the past, we're going to listen to your concerns, to your questions, and also look into the future the coming nights.
Yes, and that will not just be done by Jochem and me, but by our amazing lineup of speakers, by the Euro Commissioner for Justice himself, and of course, by you, our audience. So please do make sure to send us all your questions, comments, remarks, whatever it is. You can do so via the comment section on your screen and via the Mentimeter later on in the session.
But let's first watch a video, because only then it will become very clear why we're actually organizing an event like this. Dear Europeans, this year we're celebrating 50 years of EU consumer legislation.
Isn't that amazing, guys? Well, today we're here in Amsterdam on this sunny day to find out how much the crowd knows about their EU consumer rights.
Let's have a look.
Hey guys, where are you from?
Italy.
Estonia.
Lithuania. Dublin.
Italy.
So do you know why we're celebrating today?
No.
No idea.
Who is a national fest?
I have no idea.
No.
It's your birthday?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
It's your birthday. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
It's 50 years of EU consumer rights.
Of what?
Consumer law? I don't know what that is.
So if I'm talking about EU consumer law, do you have any idea what your consumer rights are as a European?
I don't lie, no.
And it's when you buy something, European law like protects you
Okay.
for anything.
Allow people to allow consumer to have some rights.
Indeed, yeah. And what kind of rights do you think we have?
I don't know. I think like the right to take back what you have buy and you don't want anymore.
I think there's this return policy things that the retail seller can't really screw you over.
If you have a flight and your flight is cancelled,
You can get, if the flight's cancelled and or like delayed over 6 hours or something, that you can get a refund. You can get compensation. Haha, yes.
Well, I know that you have a guarantee as to actions that occur after cancellations, after delays, after lost baggage. Well, I think there's consumer laws protecting purchases at the retail level, although I don't think they're terribly stringent.
oh, you're critical on them as well.
I would think they could always be tighter for the consumer.
Shall we sing a quick song to Happy Birthday EU? Okay. Happy Birthday EU.
So do you want to say thank you to the European Union?
Yes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, European Union!
50 years consumer law!
So this was it, and it's clear that it's time that we learn much more about our precious EU consumer rights.
So please join us for our online event on the 30th of November live from Brussels with many speakers, with the European Commissioner of Justice, and as well with Hajar and I in the studio. So hope to see you there. Bye.
Well, we did make it to the studio, Jochem.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here finally. It was very fun recording this video. Actually.
It was actually a really fun day. But if one thing did become apparent that day, then it's that we need a bit of a crash course. So dear Europeans, please allow us the next 4 minutes to give you a bit of a crash course into the key milestones of EU consumer history. For starters, did you know, for example, that Europe has one of the best consumer protections in the world?
Right, and we're not talking about this kind of protection. No, we're talking about actual consumer protection. For instance, getting up to 600 euros compensation if your flight is cancelled or significantly delayed.
Yes, or getting the hashtag ad heads up when your favorite influencer is trying to sell you their newest Mocha Choca Loca flavored lip gloss.
Right, or for instance, protection against deceptive advertising. I mean, Hajar, I still have traumas from my childhood when I was craving for these cookies at my grandmother's place and then it turned out to be her sewing supplies. That's not what is allowed in Europe.
I mean, honestly, I think that's the start of trust issues of a lot of people indeed.
Certainly.
But another one that also has to do with trust is the one where you can cancel any subscription at any time. So you know that you don't have to confirm like 10 times that yes, you do not want that service anymore. That took you only one click to subscribe to.
Right, and what about the warning for choking danger? In case you already have kids, for us it will take quite a while still, but not unimportant to mention.
Yes, or think about roaming costs so that you don't have to pay anything extra to call between EU countries. And that way you can call your soulmates from Bulgaria, Estonia and Italy all at once with no extra cost charged.
So apparently so many consumer rights that we did not know about all in the first place.
Yeah.
But when did this all started? Well, the first mentions of consumer rights were actually already given in 1957 during the Treaty of Rome, the start of the European Community.
However, it wasn't actually until 1972, so sometime in the future, that the actual first real policies were established during the Paris summit that launched the single market. So that is actually when the first real policies emerged. And now here we are in 2022, 50 years later. Celebrating indeed. And we all know that once you get a taste of those sweet, sweet consumer rights, it's hard to get enough of them. So we also saw that in 1975, the European Commission established 5 basic fundamental consumer protection rights. And bless their soul for doing it, because it allows me to say the following. Pop quiz time, Jochem.
Quiz time. This is a surprise for me, I must say.
I honestly, people, so this is not scripted. I actually plugged this slide in last minute. But Jochem, you know what I'm going to ask you. Can you name me the 5 basic consumer protections that were enforced in 1975?
Oof, that's a tough one. I would say protection of health and safety.
Yes, that's one.
For instance, the protection of economic interests.
Yes.
As well as the protection of... Oh, Hajar, you need to help me out.
Okay.
Come on,
you
haven't been practicing.
You want to see the cheat sheet a little bit.
Education and information.
That
that's
is
an important one.
Yes. 2 more.
Right to representation.
Yes. Last one?
The last one you owe me, really.
Okay, right to damages. But guys, that's impeccable. 4 out of 5 for Jochem. I think that's a really good job indeed. So
thanks.
so
We'll
great.
test on you later.
Well, let's see whether we're actually gonna do that or whether we're gonna continue, because well, you see, these 5 basically formed the fundament in 1975, and then even later on in the Single European Act of 1987, we saw that consumer protection really became an integral part of Europe. And we also saw that some new rights were being added along the way. So even in 1997, for example, with the Treaty of Amsterdam, we saw that the right to bring back online bought products was also introduced.
And then 1999 was a great year for us consumers, as it was the introduction of the 2-year guarantee against faulty products. So, for instance, if you're buying a washing machine and it turns out not to work in the first place, then you are allowed to return it within the 2 years guarantee. But also in the 2000s, actually, we have seen a lot of new introductions of consumer protection. For instance, the one that I mentioned before on the flight cancellation protection, which some of us might have used in the past.
Yeah, and you know what is underpinning all of this is that we see that the world is changing rapidly. And the European Union is constantly looking into regulations, into standards, and how they can better protect consumers because of this. So, you know, think about the digitalization that we see, think about environmental issues, or even just at the core of it, protecting the most vulnerable of consumers.
Yeah, and all these ambitions are actually part of the new consumer agenda from 2020. Ensuring the even further protection of consumer rights in the future, but also taking into account both the digital transformation as well as the green transition. And what we are seeing, I mean, we're living in a very modern world. Our consumption patterns have changed. That's what we are seeing here at this picture as well. We have online shopping, quick services, and it all leads to a surge of polluting waste and single-use packaging.
Yeah, so what you're mentioning, Jochem, that's also one of the aims of the new consumer agenda, to really make sure that we can at least enable consumers to make a bit more conscious and sustainable decisions at that.
And how do we do that? For instance, by providing information about the availability of spare parts, so that your goods can be repaired rather than that you have to buy new goods every time once it's damaged.
Yes, and you know, if we look at this digital transformation, what it's really doing at the core is that it's changing the lives of consumers. We see it in the fact that, you know, there is a wider choice of goods and services that people can choose from. But at the same time, we also see that it's more and more difficult to make a conscious decision within that.
Yeah, for instance, sometimes we are reading reviews on either restaurants or shopping websites which are just too good to be true, right? It could be paid comments, for instance. So we are really being deceived as consumers. Another example is the 90% discounts by online sellers. Sometimes that they're comparing the price to a price that actually never was there. Now, of course, that's the problem.
Yes, indeed. But guess what? To everyone watching, in the upcoming 45 minutes, we will tell you everything you need to know about your consumer rights, about the challenges they face, but also you get to ask all your questions to the experts that we have present in this session.
Right, so let's start with introducing our very first guest of the night, and I'm very excited to be able to introduce him as he's the Director of Legal and Economic Affairs at the European Consumer Organization. He is originally from Argentina, but he has been living in Europe for a long, long time, and he feels a real European. So please give a warm welcome to Augustin right now. All right. Well, Augustin, welcome. Welcome to the show. It's great having you. As mentioned, you have been working for 13 years in EU consumer legislation. Is that right?
Yes, I have. And actually, I came first to study, and my first job was actually in my organization, and I didn't know anything about consumer rights. I didn't know anything about consumer law. And then I discovered this fascinating world, which at the end of the day is shaping our lives. Because thanks to all these rights, we can navigate in this consumption society in confidence.
Yes, because that's maybe a good question to start off with. Why should we be celebrating consumer rights in the first place?
Yeah, I would say, why not? But in fairness, it's thanks to these rights, and you guys say it all, that we can trust that the products that are on the market are safe, and that if something goes wrong, there will be someone to respond, that if product got defective, that we will have remedies and rights, that advertising is fair and we are not being manipulated, so on and so forth. So certainly these rights are a fundamental pillar of our economy, our society, and most fundamentally, that can help consumers to vote with their feet, to decide what they want to buy, what they do not want to buy, and therefore if things go wrong, also have rights that can be enforced.
Yeah. Hey, and Augustine, if we try to make that concrete, we actually have two examples that we can look off, two examples that the European Commission has worked on with regards to consumer protection. The first one, and we can also see them here in the back, is the pre-ticked boxes case. Could you maybe just walk us through what the problem was with that case and also how consumer law has helped resolve it?
Yeah, that was a long time ago, basically, in the 2000s, with all the emergence of the low-cost airline companies. A common practice was to pre-tick the boxes that made consumers pay for an insurance. So basically, you were booking your flight, and then you just wanted to go through it very quickly, and you didn't realize there was a pre-ticket that you actually contracted, and you bought an insurance, and you paid for that. And that was a very common practice, and people didn't realize. So then the EU, in a big reform that led to what we call the Consumer Rights Directive, decided to ban that practice. So at the end of the day, that resulted in actually people not being worried that there will be things pre-ticked, because now it's mandatory that if you want people to pay for something, they need to be aware of that.
Right.
And this practice then was banned, and certainly has been a very important step for people when they book flights or whatever they contract online, that they can do it in confidence without knowing that no one will try to squeeze an insurance or something else extra.
So to all those people that are in a rush and just think, okay, go to checkout, they can rest assured, no extra tick boxes. Yeah.
And is there then usually one country that starts with this implementation, or is it really a top-down approach from the European Commission addressing these issues, or does it start with your organization? Where does the realization that this is really...
That's a very good question. It's a little bit of everything. Okay. So first of all, what we need to know is that most consumer rights are decided at the European level. So, of course, organizations like mine, consumer groups, they identify problems, they bring it to the attention of the European Commission, and then the Commission will make a proposal. But that proposal needs to be decided by the member states in the Council and by the European Parliament.
Yep.
And of course, once the legislative process goes through, we got this really nice legislation and rights on paper, this needs to be implemented at national level. So then we really depend on the member states, on each individual country, to ensure that these laws are applied and are enforced in practice.
Right.
So basically it's a process in which basically everybody participates, and at the end of the day, it's not enough to have the rights on paper, that needs to be applied in practice.
Now let's take the other case, which is a much more recent case, and now in 22 actually. Probably a lot of our watchers or viewers tonight are also using this service, Amazon Prime. Can you explain us a little bit on what has been recently decided on that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to the situation of the pre-ticket boxes, the case was that Amazon made it very easy for people to subscribe to Amazon Prime, but then very difficult to unsubscribe. And this is where the problem comes, because then once you are enjoying the service, but then at some point you decide, look, I don't want the service for whatever reason, but then you need to spend time in trying to find out, how do I cancel this contract? And let's face it, many people just simply give up and then pass another month that you have to pay. So our national member in Norway, actually, they did a research, and actually they tested how difficult it was to cancel the contract. And that was brought up to the European Commission, and together with the national consumer authorities, so the bodies at a national level to enforce consumer rights, they enter into a discussion with Amazon, say, look, basically this, what you're doing is illegal. So we need to find a way in which consumers can get out of the contract as easy as they got in. And at the end of the day, Amazon made some proposals, that were accepted.
Are they willing to? Do they understand from a company side of view? If you say it's illegal, you need to change it. Are they willing to think along with the European
Commission? I think, generally speaking, companies don't like to change too much their practices.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important to have the laws being enforced. And it's, like I said before, it's not enough to have them on paper, but you need to have the national authorities, to go behind and say, look, what you're doing is not right.
Yeah.
And either you change the practice, or we're going to fine you.
Okay. Yeah. Quite clear, right?
Quite clear.
Thank you. Hey, and in the meantime, I also want to remind our audience that if you have any questions for Augustin, please do send them in, or maybe just a simple thank you if you were able to cancel your Amazon Prime subscription, because it has been made easier by all the effort of all the factors in joining there. But Augustin, we actually have a bit of a surprise for you.
Oh, really?
Because we have a video question coming in all the way from Greece, from Chris. So let's take a look at it, because he has a question.
Hello everybody, my name is Chris. I am a third-year bachelor student at the Faculty of Law here at Maastricht University. I am originally from Greece, and today with this video I would like to touch upon the topic of giving in personal data in exchange for services or products online. This marketing approach is not sufficiently protected by the GDPR or the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and poses a number of risks, not only from a legal point of view, but also from an ethical point of view, because personal data are treated as a commodity. It would be great if the Commission could do something about it, maybe by raising awareness for the customers to be better informed before signing up for those websites. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. If you're watching, thank you so much for submitting that question. So, Augustin, Chris is really asking about, with regards to personal data, what does the EU do to protect consumers in that regard?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Chris. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris.
So, in fact, it's true. Personal data is seen as a commodity, and is used to personalize advertising and basically, keep you engaging with all these services, and therefore consumer advertising. And it's a worrying trend. In Europe, we do have the General Data Protection regulation, which has been a great development in the protection of people's privacy. But something that we have not done very well is its enforcement. Because many companies, especially big tech companies, have been off the hook for too long. And the problem is that if we don't enforce the laws at the right moment, that means that it becomes very difficult to change those practices in the future.
Yeah.
So answering to Chris' question, certainly we can do much better on enforcement, but also consumer law can play a very important role. For example, new practices like we call dark patterns. The fact that it's very easy on all these online platforms to share data, but it's quite difficult to change the default settings, for example, or it takes too many steps in order to decide, no, I don't want to share my data with you. So there we need to make it, first of all, much easier for people to control the data. But in the first place, we need to question ourselves, it is correct that these companies collect so much data in the first place.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond giving consent. This is about what model of society do we want? Do we want a model of society in which companies absorb all this data from us constantly and that can be used against us as well? So certainly I think there is much work to be done even beyond the GDPR itself.
Okay, well, I hope that answers your question, Chris. And I would like to start off finish off our interview with one last audience question that has been coming in. What are the current cases that the European Consumer Organization is working on? So we have mentioned Amazon Prime case. Is there something new coming up that we as consumers can be excited about? Maybe a positive message to end on this interview?
Yes, of course. There are many cases.
Take your favorite one.
So a recent case that we have done relates to WhatsApp's change of terms and conditions. And the fact that probably all the WhatsApp users have noticed this message telling you constantly, accept the terms, accept the terms, accept the terms. Basically, if I can put it bluntly, pestering people to accept change terms and conditions. But you should be entitled to say no.
Right.
I don't want this, and I don't want anything that comes with those changes. So we have actually launched what we call it an external alert. This is a sort of complaint to the European Commission, so they can look at this case together with the national consumer authorities to say, okay, how we can address it from an enforcement perspective.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another interesting case, if I'm allowed, relates to TikTok. The fact that, from our perspective, TikTok has failed in protecting especially minors on their platform.
Right, yeah.
So the question is here, what can consumer authorities, but also, for example, authorities responsible for media, can do in order to ensure that companies like TikTok, put in place mechanisms to ensure that minors, for example, are not exposed to harmful content.
Yeah, absolutely. That was also a big thing indeed. I heard it mentioned a lot in the media as well. Augustin, we really want to thank you a lot also to the people asking the questions. Maybe just before you leave, can we rest assured that you will also spend like the next 13 years to fight for our consumer rights?
I will. Hopefully, I will.
Yes, guys.
Thank you so much. And meanwhile, we'll be introducing our next guest. I'm very excited about those because they have been coming from abroad. It's Kiki Borreo. She's a Dutch climate ambassador to the future and a fashion model. And we also have Michel Scholte. He's the founder of True Price and Impact Institute. So please welcome them to the floor. All right, Michel and Kiki, welcome at the show. It's really great to having you both here. Kiki, maybe to start off with you. As mentioned, you are a fashion model, but also a climate activist and ambassador to the future in the Netherlands. What is your biggest concern concerning the consumer market at the moment?
Yeah, I think companies have become very, very good at luring people into buying things that they really do not need, using all sorts of different techniques. And of course, in my work as a model, I've seen some of these techniques happening backstage. So for example, if I'm on set and there's a product which is really ugly, we still want to make it look really good. So there is a stylist, clipping the outfit so it fits perfectly on the body. There's a makeup artist making me look pretty. There's Photoshop. There's a steamer, so it looks like these dresses that I'm wearing do not wrinkle the second I sit down, but they always do. But there's marketing tools, there's influencers. They're all luring us to buying new microtrends over and over again.
Right.
But of course, all these products do have a negative impact. So if you look at fashion, there is carbon emissions, there is water usage, water pollution, chemical use, microplastic pollutions, forced labor, cheap labor.
And we as consumers are basically falling into the trap of companies, you're saying?
We do, yeah.
So you brought one example. Actually, recently you also have posted it online. It was shared throughout Europe, I would say. That's perhaps the good thing about having a large following.
Yes.
But it was regarding Shein. Would you say something about it on just as an example? What companies are maybe misinforming the consumers?
Yeah. Unfortunately, companies have become very well aware of the fact that consumers want to buy sustainable things now, and they're using it as a marketing tool. So they're making fake claims, fake comparisons. This is a very great example of Shein. They have a purpose-driven collection with a positive vision for the future, the evolution of conscious design, creating clothes that care to protect the planet, support communities, and empower change makers around the world. But this is a company that's producing 6,000 items every day, that is forcing their workers to work 18 hours per day, only having 1 day per month free.
Right.
They're earning 3 cents per item. If they make a mistake, they have to pay the 2/3 of their wages.
So you're basically saying, us as a consumer, we look at this and we might think, oh, this is a company really adding something to sustainability.
You know, you see a plastic bottle in a green field, and there's grass everywhere, and it's purposeful.
Yeah.
It's all fake and false. And
so what should we do when it comes to legislation or the EU? Like, how can we make this different?
Yeah, this should be forbidden, just to use fake claims, fake comparisons, and they should be fined if they do greenwash, because this is a very clear greenwashing example, and I think that should definitely be forbidden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, and Michel, if we go to you, you're the founder of True Price.
Yeah.
Could you maybe explain to us briefly what it is that you do?
Sure. Well, Kiki, what you're saying, the cost to society, cost to people, cost to nature, to the climate, that is incurred with every transaction, unfortunately, in the mass production and consumption system, whether it's the things you put in the shelves in the supermarket or on e-commerce, online. We want to make those costs transparent.
Right.
And also give the voluntary option that people kind of pay for those costs. And take, for example, we have 20 purchase points in the Netherlands, supermarkets, where we literally have 100,000 transactions already, where people took the responsibility for those costs. But we also advocate for transparency. We believe that, amongst others, the European Commission, consumer rights, should include transparency of the true price of products.
Why is that so important?
Because this is a meaningful type of information. Currently you see certificates, but they have kind of this, it's called, I would say it, an easy claim that something is sustainable, whereas it's actually certifying still pollution, it's certifying poverty. It's much better to just show this is the under-earning in the value chain, and we need to do something about it. This is the pollution to water, and we need to do something about it. And also, we express it in a monetary unit, which makes it much more meaningful, because people understand, obviously, the money language, and therefore, we think it's the most, it's one of the more superior forms of transparency.
Right. So, like, if you could give us an example of that, if we would walk into one of those purchase points, what would that look like, seeing a True Price in a store?
Take a supermarket. We have 1 kilogram bananas for $1.99. That is basically what you see as market price.
Yeah.
We put next to that 16 cents. That is the social and environmental costs. And we say there's under-earning of smallholder farmers in Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
There's climate change costs due to carbon emissions in the transport, in the fertilizer use. And that is then something that you can pay for if you want. At the counter, it's on the cash registry, it is on your receipt.
Yeah.
And for us, this is a way to basically transform markets.
Right, and then people pay for it, and the money is then used to either prevent or remediate or fine actually those damages that are done to either the environment or society.
Clean, remediate.
And what is the EU already doing regarding this? Like, is this something that's already, what are they doing well, let's say, in Europe? And what is, if you would be, let's say, the president of the European Commission, what would be the first thing that you would implement as a consumer to improve consumer rights?
You know, let's first acknowledge 50 years of consumer rights protection, which is we should be very grateful for that. They have put a real floor in the market to safeguard just consumption. there was once this story that people were mocking the EU for, interfering with the details. For example, the kind of court of blinds, and people were, why is the EU determining how this court should look like? And it was actually because there was children waving out their grandparents, and they got choked by those courts. So the EU did a lot to protect people from choking, especially children. Right now, we have the climatological disaster. We have the biodiversity disaster. We have children choking again. And I think the next chapter for EU consumer rights is to assure human rights, is to assure that those children will be protected from a deteriorating living environment, but not just in Europe, but everywhere in the world.
Yeah,
amazing.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. And again, I think also that's the challenge of today, right? We're looking at the past, but especially also looking at these challenges and all the crises that are coming ahead. So thank you for sharing that. I think we also have a little surprise for you, as we have a pitch from Sarina from Austria, who has a question for Kiki. Let's have a look.
Hello, I'm Serena. I'm a 23-year-old law student from Vienna, Austria, and my concern is that there is so much branded content on Instagram, and very often it is unclear whether an influencer, and it could be on any social media platform such as Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and so on, is promoting something because they actually recommend the product or because they're getting paid for it. And my question is that, or if can the EU create even more rules for influencers to state the difference between a paid or a free collaboration? My recommendation would be that maybe the influencers must try out their products for at least 3 months or a minimum period of time before they're promoting it. So it could be at least a more authentic promotion, and that they're really standing behind what they're telling their followers what could be a great product.
Yes. Also, big thank you to Sarina. If you're watching, thank you for submitting your question. And now, before we go to you, Kiki, I also just want to say to our audience, if there are any other questions that you might have for Kiki or Michel, please do send them to us. Then we will try our best to pose as many of them as possible. But now, going to you, Kiki, Sarina mentions, this transparency, and also perhaps the fact that the EU could even create more regulation with regards to influencers. How do you reflect on her question?
Yeah, it is indeed a very good question, because influencers have a very big impact on consumer behavior, and they're driving microtrends. So we feel the need to buy new things every week.
Yeah.
But of course, they are being paid. And we just saw the little hashtag ad that we have, but that's clearly
is that
not
a mandatory?
It is mandatory to do like hashtag ad, but you can do 50 hashtags, and there's a little hashtag ad hidden into it. And also I don't think a lot of people do it, so there's a lot of hidden advertisements. So definitely we need to approve, and I think testing products for 3 months, it's a good idea, but I think what's also important is to have tools to make it much clearer that these advertisements are indeed paid for, really educate users that influencers are being paid, it's not their opinion, and also hold businesses accountable if influencers are making vague claims or false claims about products. Hold businesses accountable for that.
Do you experience that in your work and colleagues of yours, for instance? Is this indeed a thing that you're just getting paid a lot of money in order to promote a product, even though they're perhaps not even standing behind the product?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you see it a lot, and there's all these examples of people. For example, there's Shein again, using all these Shein holes. They're just sending free products to a lot of young people that are then promoting it, and sometimes they don't even get paid for it. But it's a very smart marketing tool, and it's
tricky
that they're using. Yeah. Hey, and maybe if I can go to you, Michel. I mean, if one thing is becoming clear, and I'm listening to the both of you, then it's that there's a really big urgency, right? Looking forward into the future, you already mentioned we have a climate crisis, biodiversity crisis. I'm curious to hear from you. Are you optimistic that we can even make a green transition in time with regards to consumer rights to tackle these issues?
I don't think it's a matter of making it or not making it. It's probably a continuum, and I'm afraid to conclude that we have surpassed many critical, irreversible thresholds when it comes to, for example, climate. The climatological disaster, we will have fierce climatological circumstances in the coming decades, and we need to brace for that impact. And for biodiversity, for soil quality, but also social inequality. All sorts of crises are somehow a fact of life in the decades ahead, I'm afraid to say. However, I do see that there's so much that we can do. We can, like, even if it's at hundreds of a degree of Celsius, that we can kind of prevent in heating, in warming, it's already massive in terms of impact. So therefore, I'm quite encouraged and also, happy with the EU when it comes to, for example, the agenda on consumer rights, the rights to prepare, for example, repair, that you actually, when you buy something, there is an incentive to the producer, for example, of smartphones, to make it lasting, a durable product. Because there is a right to having repair costs incurred to the producer. That's an example. Or
so you actually think that consumer rights can have a contribution to the fight of climate change.
Exactly, and I think the EU, as they are leading this agenda, is actually making sure that there's real a change also when it comes to climate, but beyond that as well.
And on top of that, if you would have to name very briefly just one thing that they could do in the future?
Well, the radical transparency of the true price of products, the true cost of products, I think that's something that the EU can kind of champion, and I'm hopeful that that will happen in the years ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, but we would actually like to have you here a little bit while we're getting to the audience, as we would like to interact with you guys as well. We are really craving to hear all your thoughts and views on this topic as well. So we would like to encourage you to take out your phone and get to menti.com, because we're going to ask you a couple of questions online to see what our audience is actually thinking about this topic that we have been discussing, whether you have some ideas yourself. So get to menti.com and use the code that you're seeing in the screen, but also the link is being sent now in the comments of YouTube and Facebook, so you can also just click on the link and get to menti.com so we can start off.
I mean, this is really your chance, guys, to show off everything you've learned so far about consumer rights. Maybe just to show some of the inspiration you may have gained from our guests already, from Kiki, Michel, Augustine, that we've already heard, looking forward. With that being said, I think some people already filling out the very first question. So
can you read it out?
Yeah, I will actually, because I'm quite curious to hear what you think, because we're already testing that knowledge, because the first question is, what is not an EU consumer right? So do you think that it's the first answer, the right to cancel concert tickets within 14 days of purchasing? Do you think it's the second one, which is the right to truthful advertising? Or will you go with the last one, which is the right to have broken goods replaced or repaired? Now, I see some answers coming in. Be mindful of the fact that the question is, what is not an EU consumer right? But Jochem, if I'm quite frank,
they're doing pretty well.
You're doing really well, because the right answer is indeed the first answer. Now, to those of you wondering why is the right to get a cooling off period with my concert tickets not under EU consumer law? Well, that actually has to do with the fact that the organizers of concerts, it's quite difficult for them to find replacement for example, a seat in a concert hall if you cancel last minute. So that is actually why it's not part of the 14-day cooling off period.
Right, let's get to the next question, as we can see that all of you have been voting a lot. And the next question is, in your opinion, are you satisfied with the current EU consumer law? So this is an opinion question, and I'm very eager to see what your thoughts are.
Maybe
so far,
in the meantime,
very positive.
Yeah, I see some people in the middle, but maybe in the meantime, Michel, real quickly, as people fill it out, are you satisfied with current EU consumer law?
I mean, I'm hungry for change, a little bit angry, so satisfied, no, but I'm grateful. I know it's not an entitlement, it's an achievement. It's something that we, with all of the member states, have created. But I still think we need to do much more.
Hungary. We should actually have an option for Hungary as well.
For Hungary, well, we had a great snack in
like
advance, so I'm not hungry. So actually, we can see that the audience is really positive, which is a good thing, and I think indeed we already marked all the achievements in the past, so no wonder we have a positive audience.
Yes.
Let's get to the next question.
Yes, because the next question is, have you bought something through an online ad in the past 3 months? So let us know. Is it yes? Is it no, but I did buy something online? Or no, I don't buy anything online, not through an ad, but also not through visiting websites.
Kiki, I understood that you actually don't buy items online anymore. Is that right?
No, that's right. Yeah,
Can
I
you
stopped
explain?
buying. I think I stopped buying items online and new items overall just to reduce my own personal impact. And I thought that for me was quite an easy step to make. But
Even as a fashion model, you say you are only buying secondhand.
yeah, I want to show as a fashion model that it's good to buy secondhand and re-wear your clothes.
That's
Okay,
good.
that's great.
Impressive,
That's
yeah.
great. Well, still, the majority of us has actually bought something through an online ad. Have
Yeah.
you, Hajar?
Not through an online ad. I mean, I'm always very stubborn when I see them. Like, no, I know that I'm being targeted, so I swipe them away.
Right.
You,
Well,
Jochen?
when preparing for the show, you were probably a very
very proud of
concerned
myself.
consumer. I
Yeah.
understand. Well, let's get to the last question.
Actually, indeed, because if you say concerned consumer, at least what people find important, this question is all about that, because the question is, what is important to you to feel treated fairly as a consumer? So this is an open question. I see transparency coming in already. Definitely someone that has been inspired by you guys. But please do let us know. In the meantime, maybe quickly, Kiki, Michel, what is important to you to feel treated fairly?
I think transparency is a very important part of being able to make an informed choice when you buy something. So transparency for me would be very high.
Yeah.
Michel?
And for me, the ability to respect and protect human rights. So if I don't want to contribute to poverty in value chains, I would love to do that through buying my most basic goods, whether it's food, whether it's transportation.
Yeah.
So
And
being
how would you phrase that into one word?
Transparency.
Well, yeah, but also sustainability, the ability to actually sustain.
Yeah. Well, I can see that there's so many great comments going in. We see clarity, true information, safety, right to information on the product. I'm really impressed by all the things coming in. Please remember that while I'm going to thank you guys, that you can keep on sending in your questions for the next guest, because thank you, first of all, Kiki and Michel. It was a true honor having you here on the show, and we hope you have a safe travels back home.
Yes, because for our next segment, we have another special guest, which is none other than the European Commissioner for Justice himself. So please also give a very warm welcome to Mr. Didier Reynders. Welcome, Mr. Reynders. It's amazing to have you here.
Thank you. I'm coming from the Parliament. So
I was going to say,
wonderful.
Well, then
also to discuss about the consumer policy.
Yeah.
So it was
oh, that's actually very, very good. Very
Really?
fitting. Then.
What were you discussing?
the Consumer Credit Directive. Tomorrow we'll have maybe a final trilogue with the Parliament, the Council and the Commission to give the same protection to the consumers online that they have offline for the credit.
Yeah.
Consumer credit.
Well, then I would say it's no better timing actually to look back on 50 years of EU consumer rights being here with us tonight. Hey, maybe I can even start with that, Mr. Reynders. It's a bit of a fundamental question, but I would actually be really curious to hear from you that why is it so important that we're looking back and celebrating 50 years of EU consumer rights?
First of all, it's a good occasion to celebrate. So why not to take the 50th anniversary to do that? No, but more seriously, I want to say that it's a very important policy, very close to the citizens, because we are all citizens, but quite all consumers. And we have seen a lot of achievement during the 50 years, and certainly this very concrete element for the citizens and the consumers. And I want to say, as we're speaking about offline, online, during 50 years, we have built a real consumer policy to protect the consumers offline, because it was for the 50 years, mainly offline, that they were organizing their actions and the activities as consumers. Now we will start maybe a second part in the 100th anniversary. I will come back, of course, after 100 years to see what it will be possible to do online and maybe more to move from the consumer protection to more and more consumer rights, and the way to enforce the consumer rights. But we were pioneer in Europe about the consumer policy, and it's very important to celebrate the fact that it was a very important policy directly linked with the daily life of all the European citizens and with very good achievements.
I'm wondering, because we have a lot of young European viewers here, and actually at the beginning we showed a video where we interviewed people on the streets, and a lot of young people actually had no idea on what their own consumer rights were. Is that problematic, you would say? Is it really necessary that we as consumers are aware of what all our consumer rights are? Because I have the feeling that maybe our generation doesn't even know all the rights that they actually have.
No, it's very important to be well informed about your rights. And first of all, the existing rights from maybe the beginning of the process with the consumer policy, the 14 days of rights of withdrawal was very important, and we have extended slowly year after year such a right of withdrawal for all the different kind of possibilities for the consumers. But if you look to the fact that you have a new product, it's not without a real regulation at the EU level that it's possible to have a 2 years guarantee. Yeah. And you have a legal guarantee for all the products. So it's very important to that. But it's also very important to inform better the consumer in the future about the new policies that we try to implement. And to give just an example, if you want to have a real influence on the climate and to fight against climate change, you need to know what are the best products, or at least you need to receive the best possible information about the consequence of what you are doing with one product or another one. And it's the reason why we are now so intensive in the discussions about the repairability of the products, or to fight against premature obsolescence and so on. So but first of all, to give information.
It would be interesting to talk a little bit about that, because also our previous guests, right, they also mentioned the climate crisis. Obviously, our generation is just as you're very much concerned with well, the future in a sense. On the same time, consumer law could also be an opportunity to do something about it. Could you say a little bit on the new consumer agenda of 2020, like what concrete measures are being taken within this context of consumer protection to fight climate crisis?
Maybe for not only about the past, but also the actual situation, what is very important is to continue to enforce better the consumer rights, because it's fine to think about the future, to think about new rights, but it's very important. And I've seen that during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, just about the package travel directive, or the cancellation of many flights, we have seen that it was needed to enforce better the consumer rights about the reimbursement of flight tickets or reimbursement of travel package. That's very important. So first, to continue in the consumer agenda, to see how we have the possibility to enforce better the existing rights. But we have two main priorities for the future. The first one is the green transition, so climate and fight against climate change, but more than that, all the green transition that we try to organize, and the digital transition. So that means how it's possible to take into account the fact that the consumers are more and more online. And so we need, I said, to transfer the protection or the rights from the offline sector to the online one. I said I was in the Parliament. I will have tomorrow many discussions with the Council and the Parliament, the Consumer Credit Directive. But of course, you know that it's possible to go to a bank and to receive a credit. But now, online, you have so many different lenders with so many different proposals and so many vulnerable consumers with the high inflation and the energy price and so on, that we need to protect the consumers online. That's the digital transition. But the green transition, again, is first of all to give the most important element, the information, again, to the consumer. How it's possible to have the opportunity to make good choices about products, services in relation. And I will say, for the young generation, to think about the influence of many digital tools or devices on climate.
Is important.
But sometimes it seems to be out of the discussion, but it's not true. There's an influence.
But what underpins all of that, Mr. Reiners, if I hear you correctly, is also that it's all about transparency. We've heard it mentioned also by Michel Kiki, by the young people filling out the Mentimeter. True pricing was also mentioned. Is that not an example of what the European Commission could also implement to better enable transparency for consumers?
Yes, but it's in line with the information. So we have had many discussions with many producers and with the consumer organization at the European level, BEUC, the organization of the consumer at the EU level, to see how it's possible to ask to disclose more and more documentation to the consumers about the products and the services. And that's very important. When we discuss about the right to repair, it's an old discussion to implement a real right to repair, because there are many people saying, I want to have a real repairability of my products. It's needed to start with the design of the products. And in the design, it's possible to organize a design with a real repairability. But if you are doing that, you need to give enough documentation about the ways to organize the reparation. And then, of course, you need to have professionals able to do that. And so the transparency about the design of the product, the way to organize a real right to repair, and maybe the possibility to reach professionals able to do that is very important. So we try to work more and more with a very transparent approach. But to do that, we need to come with mandatory systems. It's fine to have voluntary commitment from different companies, but at the end, it's needed to go to a regulation to avoid, when you are speaking about transparency, the greenwashing. The fact that it's easy to say, I'm the most efficient company with the most efficient product to fight against climate change. But then you need to verify. Again, enforcement, control, monitoring on this.
Yeah, because I think we could actually talk further on this topic with one of the audience questions. Please keep on sending in your questions because we have many coming in for you, and we of course only have some limited time. But this is a question from Joshua. He's asking, how's the digital age changing these laws? Are they keeping up with the challenges of this century? And maybe we can also answer this question in relation to what you mentioned, the challenges of moving from offline to online and the monitoring. Since we're all in an online age at the moment, I can imagine it's really hard to monitor.
It's very hard to monitor, but I will give just two examples. One is not directly for the consumer rights, maybe for the citizens' right. You know that in the past, in the last century, it was possible to see hate speech. But of course, if you have hate speech in a cafe or in a restaurant with some people around you, it's just a private issue and you may try to combat it. If you are online with the social media and you receive a real harassment with real thousands of messages with hate speech against you or hate speech about one specific person, it's become to be totally different. So we need to fight more about such a kind of behavior, because it's not the same when you have a private conversation with some people around you and when you are on the social media. And for that, we have tried to organize a real legislation about all the different elements with the digital companies. I'm thinking about Digital Services Act or Digital Market Act, but to be very concrete, to organize the market, but also to organize a real monitoring on, to give an example, hate speech. The same for the consumers with unsafe products. How it's possible to put out of the online marketplaces all the unsafe products. You know maybe that 70% of the unsafe products are coming from abroad, for third countries, and for a large part from China, to be very concrete. But you need to be sure that for the marketplace, the online marketplace, it will be possible to remove those products from their marketplace. And to do that...
How do you do that?
We need, first of all, to start with voluntary commitment, and we have organized voluntary commitment with
Is that enough?
Code of conduct, and it's not enough. When you are doing that, you see that it's an improvement, but then you need to ask to all the companies, all the online marketplace to do the same. And to that, you need to go to a new regulation. And about the product safety, we have organized this week, again, a new discussion with the Parliament and the Council, and we have reached an agreement of a new regulation on general product safety regulation. To do what? Again, to be sure that it's possible to act very rapidly. When you detect an unsafe product, it must be possible to remove the product very fast and to work also with third countries. We have a dialogue with the US about unsafe products. We try also to have an action plan with China.
Okay, that's actually quite interesting because it sort of also relates when you talk about like these power dynamics between us as countries negotiating, but also big companies. There is a question from Nicolas in the chat to you, Commissioner, and he asks, "What is the leverage of the EU facing the big companies to ensure consumer protection?" So yeah, really actually about that entire negotiation.
As Commissioner for Justice, I'm also in charge for the GDPR, so the data protection, personal data. And there we have different data protection authorities able to impose fines if there are some violations of the regulation. And you have maybe seen in the last months that it was possible for different authorities to impose very important fines, hundreds of millions of euros, on different big tech companies. It's the same here. We need to work with a real mandatory system, so a regulation, with the capacity to impose some fines. And when we are speaking about the Digital Services Act, so the way to protect the citizens against hate speech, but also the way to protect against unsafe product, it must be possible to have a system of supervision with administrative bodies able to impose some sanctions. And of course, now in the DSA is new, we've said that the sanction will be in relation, in proportion with the turnover of the company. Because of course it's not the same if you impose 1 million to a small company or to a big tech. But if you make a relation, you have organized a relation between the fine and the turnover, it's become to be more important.
Okay.
I was last week in Dublin, to be very concrete. I have had contacts with the people of Twitter and Meta, because they are located there for Europe. And of course, when you look to the layoffs in Twitter, less and less people in the company, we have expressed our concerns about the possibility to implement all regulations. If it's not the case, we'll have to take decisions. And the decisions are huge. Fines, and if it's needed, to stop the activity at the end. So we have a huge leverage in Europe, of course, for the activities in Europe. What they are doing in other parts of the world, it's not really our
But
competence.
that's interesting, that you say we don't make it absolute, but we make sure that we make it relative to the turnover or the size of the company so that it is also felt.
Yeah, because it's very important to take into account the size of the company.
fair enough.
Again, if you impose a fine of 1 million, it seems to be a lot,
For
but for a very large company, not. And so we need to take into account the turnover when we decide about... and it's with independent bodies that it will be possible to decide about fines, like we are doing now.
We already mentioned before the new consumer agenda in 2020, or it was approved in 2020. What is the biggest challenge you would say that you see for yourself as you're the commissioner in office? What is something that you would still like to achieve, or something that once you leave the office you look back and you think, well, this is what I have contributed?
But first of all, about the agenda itself, is to be sure that we have a common agenda with the member states. And so I'm going to different national consumer dialogue. Again, it was possible to do that in Ireland, but I have organized many different consumer dialogue, hopefully now with a physical presence in the country. And I've seen that it's become to be more and more evident to harmonize the different agenda, to work on the same issues at the same moment in all the member states. It's not possible all the time, but because we have the same concerns about the situation of the consumers now. And just to give you an example again about the product safety, it's very important that we exchange informations about that. And what we try to achieve is to be sure that we have, again, the same enforcement everywhere. Because if we have a problem with an unsafe product in one member state, we need to be sure that it's possible to communicate with all the others through the network and to remove the product for all European citizens. And every day, that's the goal that we have, to be sure that the protection is the same for all the European consumers. And that's the fact that it's a challenge, but we are proud of the last 50 years about that. Because with the harmonization that we have put into place year after year, we have more and more the same protection for all the consumers in the entire Europe. And of course, online is become to be more and more important because it's the access for all to the same online marketplaces. And the second element is also my reaction as myself, a citizen or consumer. To give you an example, it's become to be difficult to support the cookies online and to see that you need to answer to so many questions before to have an access to purchase something or to go to a website or to have an information on Google and what else. But is it possible one day to have a sort of ID, personal ID on internet to say what you agree on or not.
So that you don't
and then to say, with that, it's no more to you to explain all the time what you agree or not, but to the different online marketplace, to the different owner of website, to go to that and to see what you agree or not, and not to go too far with you. It's the same about the targeted advertising, or it's possible to avoid the use of so many dark patterns with many negative effects. And in fact, since 50 years, the main word was trust, and it's still the situation now. We need to be sure that with all the rules that we are putting into place, we are building a real trust between the consumers and all the producers or the marketplaces. And it's in their interest, because we are speaking since some moments about the consumer rights, but it's also a policy dedicated to help all the companies at work, online or offline, to try to have a contact with the consumers. It's on both sides that you have an advantage, because when you have a real set of consumer rights, you are building a real trust. And you know that to go to shop, you need to have a trust in the producer.
Hey, Mr. Reiners, a final question. We have many young people from all over Europe tuning in. Would you have a final message for them?
But maybe two messages. The first one, to think about, I said, the influence of the digital activities on the climate. Because I've seen it many times. It seems to be that there is no effect. It's possible to send mails, SMS, to make videos and so on without any effect. It's important to think about what is better, offline or online, and so we will have more and more discussions about that. The second element, of course, is to propose to the Commission many new ideas about what they are doing, because of course in the Commission we are not all with colleagues of 18 years old or 20 years old.
How does it work? Can they just write your office with
Of course, it's very possible, and you know that we are launching many consultations. It's possible to work with the consumer organizations too, but also to form some groups of young people and to say, with what we are doing as consumer in the young generation, it's maybe useful to send some messages about what are our dreams for the next 50 years. And again, I will come back for the 100th anniversary and we'll exchange. But at that time, we'll have a new generation of young people, of course.
Yeah, very true. And I think that's a nice ambition as well. So to all the young people, know that the mailbox of Mr. Reiners is open.
Of course.
And please do send in all those questions. Commissioner Reiners, I really want to thank you for all your time. And also, of course, a big warm thank you to all our other speakers, but of course to you, our audience. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope that you did learn a bit more about your consumer rights today.
Yeah, and as Hajar said, we are really thankful for all your questions, your comments, your contribution to this show. For us, it was great, and I think for all our speakers as well. So thanks a lot for that.
Yes. Well, I think that brings us already to the end of today's event. If you learned a bit more about your EU consumers' rights, I think that we did our job well today, Jochem. And with that being said, we hope to see you next time and have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.